what a performance there by J. King.
J. King, full plot armor.
J. King is pushing himself into the ranks of the legend.
J. King is our world champion!
J. King 7!
What? The back-to-back KARDS world champion!
All right, everybody, welcome back to part 2 of KARDS Deep Cuts. I am here joined once again by Bear Gardener on the top and Core down in the bottom, if I can do my pointing correctly. And if you somehow missed part 1, you should probably go back and watch that. But this is a combination KARDS quiz show slash podcast slash deep dive into conversations of all sorts slash torture, where I am asking increasingly difficult questions to my two guests, who are both working with each other or against each other, depending on how easy it is to answer the question, for points, but really the point of it is as a jumping off point for future discussions. So if you missed part 1, that was all about collection. Part 2 is all about balance and changes and all sorts of stuff that has gone on in KARDS and throughout KARDS. This part is going to have 4 questions, and this part is a bit more difficult than the last part, hence each question will be worth 2 points. However, you guys are fully allowed to use kards.com/collection, the in-game KARDS collection. You can use whatever you want. Obviously don't just Google the answer to things, although I don't know how helpful that would be if you tried, but you are absolutely welcome to look through all of the cards and reference the dates for expansions and stuff that I posted in chat. So, does anyone have anything to say, or are we good to jump straight into question 1 of balance here?
Send help.
Yeah, please.
Blink twice.
What you don't know is that neither of us are currently located in our home country. Somehow we've got people to pull us to Canada. We are in a basement. Please, no, I'm good to go.
I'll say this. Do you so? Currently, the score is 3-1 with Core in the lead. Do you guys think you will do better in part 2 than you did in part 1? So in Bear's case, do you think you will get at least 2 points? So only one. You only need 1 question right, or just bonus points. You don't even have to get it right. If you got it close enough.
In fairness, given how many times I have reviewed balance patches and the fact that I've done at least 2 history videos with you, I really should do better in balance than I do in remembering the collection. Also, bearing in mind that I have memory issues to start with. But you did say the questions are getting harder, but I'm still going to believe in myself. This is balance-based. I should do better here.
And Core, how do you think you're going to do in this section? I will say this section is probably a bit more history-based than the last one.
I mean, to be fair, pretty much everything on this has been before my time. I'm just riding the wave of bonus points, maybe.
Hey, but now you have access to your collection, so now you can go in and look at previous cards. You can sort by expansion. You can do all sorts of things. Hopefully that will.
I'm sure this will be very helpful.
All right, well, let's jump into question 1 here. What calendar year has had the fewest card changes in the history of KARDS, starting with the finalization of the core set, which happened in August 2019? So there were card changes before August 2019 in the calendar year of 2019. I am starting the count at September 2019 for the calendar year of 2019, and then obviously 2020 to 2024 is just the full calendar year, and then 2025 hasn't finished yet, but it still counts towards this question. And changes includes all things. So that includes reworks. Basically, if anything on the card changed whatsoever, every instance of that changing on every card. So also to be clear, this is not the number of patches, this is the number of cards changed. So size of patches matters here as well.
Yes, because you're a complete bar steward.
So I'm gonna immediately like rule out 2019 because after base set gets finalized, there is still a lot of balance work to be done, and then you have Allegiance on top of that. And bear in mind, base set and Allegiance were like two big sets, so I can see like a lot of card changes happening. I'm I'm gonna lock in early and I'm just gonna say 2020. I'm gonna say like between theaters and breakthroughs, there was like very few changes.
All right. So you're saying 2020. Bear, do you
Yeah.
have an answer? Don't feel pressure to answer immediately. We're gonna take our time here, but
I'm just
No,
I'm just shooting.
the
I have no idea.
thing is, I do have an answer because I actually think we might have referenced this when we were doing certain history videos. I'm actually, because I know early on the game had some very special issues, I actually think the year with the least changes is going to be 2019.
interesting. Okay, so 2019 and 2020. Before I'll give you guys a chance to theoretically change your answers. But I want to sort of the point of discussion that this question is intended to bring up is how card games go about changing things based on like how old they are. Like, what is the sort of bar graph of number of changes over a card game's lifespan? And I'm very curious since I have less experience with just card games as a genre than you two, how that works in the games that you guys have played. Like, was there more changes at the beginning and that slowly dried up, or was it like sort of did they hit like a consistent pace that they maintained year through year?
Like what? I'm gonna mainly be referencing Tessel because that's I think like the closest point of comparison I have. I played Tessel like towards the end of its beta. There was a ton of changes to Tessel in beta and like just after release. There was like a long period after because Tessel didn't really get its first major expansion for quite a while. It had like one or two minor set additions, like mini sets, but they all kind of came in and stayed the same. There was very few balance changes post, like post core set and like Madhouse, which is like the first mini set. Then we kind of got like Heroes of Skyrim, which had very few changes needing to be made to it. Like Legends was one of those games that like there was very few outliers that needed to be changed. It's like the majority of cards changed between like beta and like just after full release when they had to like touch certain things like Crystal Tower Crafter and the 2/2 3-cost Goblin because it was like this Tempo Assassin list was everywhere, and there was like a few other pieces that got like changed up as well. Like Manticora got its summon nerf so it can only target same lane things, like minor things, like minor changes like that. So I think like the first, I want to. I'm just trying to think because I feel like Heroes of Skyrim there was like almost no changes. So like that's why I'm kind of thinking like the first year of expansions for cards might have been like roughly the same, where there was a ton of changes like at the end of like base set and during Allegiance while they were still kind of getting things down, and then Theaters and Breakthrough came out and there was like a handful of things to be changed. Because when you look at like the release, the release like ramping up as they release more sets, there's going to be more cards that need to be changed more frequently. And if they were doing the same thing as they're doing now, where they release a handful of balance patches throughout the year, there's going to be a number of cards changed as there's more sets. So I just feel like that's why I kind of feel like 2020 might be correct, but I could be wrong. It could be like 2023 when they got their shit together and it was like everything was perfect.
Yeah, that perfect year of cards where there was no need to
Oh,
make
yeah,
any balance.
that halcyon glorious year.
Yeah,
No,
that one
so-
year when there was no Reichsbank Commando.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I will say, kind of referencing what Core said, Tessel did have a reputation for being actually really quite consistently balanced in comparison to a lot of other online games when I was spending time talking about different online card games back in the day. And it's one of the reasons that I got curious about it and then got into it just as it started not going in the right direction, which was a pain for me because I missed something that I think I would have enjoyed from what little I got to play of it. Hearthstone has been an absolute madhouse of just throw it all out the window whenever you feel like it. Gwent's weird because Gwent started out having quite slow pace of change, but now that it's gone into sunset and community maintenance, they actually have a full-blown balance council every month. So there's constant change, and I can't really help you because one of the things that's interesting to me is the scaly lizard in the background is that I'm so used to the majority of card games. I'm like this concept of changes, like the sheer difficulty of changing a physical card. Means that the majority of games that I've played, Magic the Gathering and various other competitive physical games, whether that be Netrunner, whether that be Vampire the Eternal Struggle, whether that be... Anyway, I could list a million. But it was incredibly rare that you would want to change the text of a card because you'd be much more likely to just put it on a ban list for tournaments, because it was easier than asking people to change the text. So, I mean, in my experience, KARDS is... How to put it? A little scattershot in its approach to balance, but actually in what feels like sometimes a more targeted and healthy way than some of the lunacy that I lived through in Hearthstone, and some of the slightly weird moments that have happened in Gwent.
Yeah, with Hearthstone, I played, like, when I played Hearthstone the most was sort of right before Nax coming out, which was their very first expansion, to basically around when they introduced rotation. Was when I played the most. And in that period of time, Hearthstone's policy towards, like, nerfing cards was they absolutely did not want to do it if they did not have to. And that changed at a certain point. Like, I remember there was just a point where it was just like, they were like, yeah, no, we're like, hands off, whatever, things will solve themselves. And then they got, like, really gung-ho with it, and, like, now I see fairly regular Hearthstone patches where they kind of, like, recognize, yeah, okay, some stuff's gonna be better than we thought it was, some stuff's gonna be weaker than we thought it was. It's on us to change that, and so people enjoy the cards they have. But yeah, that was certainly not Hearthstone's, or Blizzard's, I suppose, mentality starting with things. Before we go to the answer, I will just remind you that it is card changes, not just necessarily nerfs. So this also includes buffs, as well as rotated cards being... Previously rotated cards being reworked, being brought back in, whether that was they were too good, and the just effect needed to be changed for the card to come back, or because, like, it was a terrible card that's being brought back with a new effect to work with something new. So yeah, you guys are locking in. Corey, you said 2020. Barry said 2019.
Yeah. See, I have no prior knowledge of how they used to do, like, balance changes like, when I started playing. So I'm just assuming it's been roughly the same thing this whole time, even though that's likely not the case. So 2020.
I'm also curious. If you guys get, like, really close, I'll give you points, but this is more just for curiosity's sake. What do you think the actual number of card changes is on the low end and the high end? So, like, if I remember correctly, I think the next slide has basically all of the years with the number of changes, or at least the most and the least.
I honestly think the bottom end is next to none, because my logic is the conversations that I've had with you and a few of the OG competitive players about the early part of KARDS and the wild woolly craziness and the things that just got passed over for so long before anyone even realized they were an issue. So I think the lower end of this is very, very few changes.
I think, like, over a 12-month span, like the year span, if you're talking about buffs, nerfs, and, like, changed text, I'd imagine if we're talking about, like, the low end, I'd have to say, like, somewhere around 60 or 70 changes. Like, this is across all cards, all buffs, all nerfs, all reworks, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think that would be, like, on the lower end for a 12-month span, and the higher end could be, God knows what, like 200 changes.
This is going to be interesting one way or the other.
All right.
Exactly. I can't wait to see how wrong I can.
So the year that had the fewest card changes was 2023.
I got that.
It had
God damn,
22 changes, 9
changes.
buffs, 8 nerfs, 5 reworks across the entire calendar year of 2023.
I was right. It was the 1 year they got their shit together.
So,
Oh!
as somebody who played through
Okay.
cards a lot in 2023, that was the year they absolutely lost their shit. The game was not balanced. They just stopped balancing it. They just decided in 2023, we're just not going to do balance patches anymore. How does that feel, guys? The meta was terrible. We all hated it. We all wanted the meta to change. And 1939 was like, we're too busy working on mobile to balance the game. Yeah, only 22 changes over the entire year is actually kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I'm taking my point for saying that I knew the low end was gonna be ludicrously low, but that's lower than even I would have thought, because that's bonkers.
So, I don't have it on the slide, but I do have it here in my notes. So the year with the second least number of changes was 2019, with 35 changes in that like period of time, September to December. Then it's 2025 because it's 54 changes. It's not finished. Then 2022 with 85 changes, 2020 with 87 changes,
okay.
2021 with 103 changes, and then 2024 with 108 changes. Now, the reason I capped 2019 at September is there was like basically 2 balance patches a month, and I was like, I'm not going through all of this. It's a lot. It's not the smallest. If I included all of it going into like closed beta, it would almost certainly be first.
God, yeah.
Which
you just. But that would make no sense.
Which actually means the number of balance patches, or the number of changes in the cards, is kind of a V shape if you were to graph it out. Where it starts really, really high as they're crystallizing the base set, and then it just went down. Not because they got really good at balance, but because they just, I think, had a design philosophy of less changes is good. And then they realized that sucked, because the game was awful. And now they're kind of like going back to the more regular changes. The actual like pace of changes is much, much slower now than it used to be, I would say, in terms of how quickly it takes patches to happen and how many patches a year there are because of mobile, and it takes longer to roll out an update across multiple expansion or multiple platforms. But I would say the size of the patches have grown now, so that's why like 2024 is a similar size. Well, actually, 2024 is the biggest one. It's also reworks. That was something that Cards did a lot now, like sort of in the later end of their timeline, is buffing terrible cards. I think if they were buffing terrible cards from the beginning, 2020 would have been huge, because there was a lot of terrible. The number of cards that used to be literally vanilla that got like just useless card text added to it just so it wasn't vanilla in a balance patch is very high. But yeah, that's. I thought that was very interesting going through this and looking at it, because I guess it just comes down to design philosophy. It reminded me a bit of the Hearthstone, very early Hearthstone design philosophy of like, we're just not going to make changes, and like, you know, if things are overpowered, we'll just release a new expansion with answers to the overpowered thing from the previous expansion. And Cards has done that, and now I feel like Cards has kind of stepped away from that a little bit, where they're more fine to balance powerful stuff down. We might not like how little they do it, or the ways they do it, but
I will say I do think they've definitely, and in particular, I think it's worth noting and I know you mentioned it, the habit that 1939 are getting into of not being afraid to rework cards, either just whole cloth or from rotation back into the game, is a sign of a company that's being smart about a game that has now reached a certain level of maturity where you kind of have to get more proactive, because, and I know people are always like, power creep is evil. Sorry, kids, power creep's how card games work. That's just how you keep selling cards. But you get to a certain break point in design where you have to start being more proactive with changes, because otherwise your original set and your original stuff, unless you literally like sunset it out of the game forever, just becomes chaff entirely. And I think it's nice to see 1939 trying to drive it so that isn't the case, even though we may not agree with some of the changes, and yeah, there are certain ones they could maybe have gone a little bit further on, or not bothered at all and changed something else.
That's another thing I didn't ask you guys beforehand, but is the ratio of 9 buffs to 8 nerfs about what you expected, like 50-50? Is that similar to the games that have had changes? Because just thinking back to Hearthstone, nowadays Hearthstone buffs a lot more cards than they used to, so I have no idea what the ratio would be now. But I know back in the day, I don't think like Hearthstone buffed a single card for like the first like year and a half that I played it. Like once it left beta, it was like, well, nerf cards if they're too good. If the card sucks, it sucks. Too bad.
Yeah. That was pretty much how Hearthstone was up until maybe 2-3 years ago. Then they started buffing like underperforming cards. Like when they released a new set, like if these many cards were bad, they'd like, oh, okay, well, we'll touch them up a little bit so people feel less bad about pulling them. Legends did like a handful of buffs every now and again, not all that often. Again, Legends was a like remarkably well balanced game overall. There was very few things, like every now and again something would break and they'd fix it. Like we had that one Champions Master Series where like Empire Abomination was like the best deck, but they like pretty much fixed that immediately after the tournament by like basically killing the engine for the deck. So like for the most part, Legends was incredibly well balanced. There was very few cards that got buffed, but there was also like not all that many cards that got nerfed in the grand scheme of things. Magic, Magic just can't really fix bad cards, but also they want bad cards for drafts. So, Eternal is another card game I've played quite a bit of. They very rarely do buffs, every now and again only, primarily nerfs to like fix like Throne or Expedition. Pokemon is physical, so that doesn't really do anything. I don't recall Shadowverse ever doing many buffs either.
I mean, my general experience has been, first of all, for the aforementioned reasons, whether it's Magic or the digital implementation of any other physical card game you want to talk about, you need to remove it from this discussion, because if the card game exists in a physical format, buffs, nerfs, and reworks are just not a thing. Because that's not how the physical world works. But most digital games that I know of lean much harder toward nerfing than buffing. It's really interesting to me to see that they just on this statistic for 2023, the idea that you'd come out this close to 50-50, I would rarely, like most of the time, I would expect to see 80-20 with nerfs being much heavier.
Yeah.
Because that's how card games digitally traditionally deal with the problem. Because the other thing is, and it's a marketing ploy, but it is a truism of the market, is you want to release cards over-tuned and tune them down, because at least then the card is more desirable. Whereas if you release a card that's crap and tune it up, people just don't play it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very conscious design decision from the KARDS design team, balance team, whatever you want to call it, of putting in buffs with the nerfs. And like, if you look at the cards that have been buffed, like if you just go through the history of different patches, there's a lot of patches where it's like, oh, there was 4 nerfs and like 12 buffs. And all 12 buffs are entirely meaningless and will not affect the game in any way. All of the cards still suck and will still never see play ever. But it's just, I think they want to people, when they see an announcement and they're like, there's cards being changed. Obviously, there's the people who don't play the powerful decks or don't have the powerful cards, who are very happy to see that this deck that keeps beating them is being destroyed. But then there's the people who, like, you know, spent their monthly allowance to get the cards to build the powerful deck, and now their deck is gone. And cards doesn't have like a refund process that like Blizzard does with Hearthstone, where if a card gets nerfed, you can completely refund it and get a different card of the same rarity if you want. So I think they just do a lot of buffs so that like of just terrible cards. So like the taste in your mouth after looking at a patch is more positive if you were somebody who was really enjoying the cards that got nerfed. And I mean, this has been more successful than in at times than it has. Like, there's been times where this just does not work at all, where it's just like they nerf a very popular deck and then give us a bunch of trash that no one's going to touch, and people don't talk about the buffs at all. But like, there's been times where they've buffed a card that's like, oh, this is actually interesting. Because also I feel like with balance patches, especially with how slow they are, I think oftentimes in like 2024, 2025 cards, I feel like we can typically predict the cards that are going to get nerfed. Now, maybe not necessarily the way they will be nerfed, or like maybe it's like, okay, it's this card or that card. It's one of these two cards. But like no one can expect the buffs that are going to happen, because you could arguably buff like 90% of the collection, because 90% of the collection is worse than the top 10% of the collection, which is what like sees tier 1 play. So anytime it comes to be like, oh, okay, we probably know, like, we have an idea of like the 6 or 7 cards that will be in the 4 nerfs of the balance patch. We have no idea what the buffs are going to be, especially the reworks. Like, when you know like a card's going to come out and you're like, some of these cards are getting reworked, what's it going to be? Sometimes it's really, really cool and really interesting, and lets you play with a card in a new way, and then sometimes it's Counter-Strike.
Yeah, I mean, fair. To be fair, you're not wrong. I mean, if you go back and look at, certainly back in the last year and 2 years or so, God, I've been doing this a while, that both you and I have done, like, just one person to camera reactions to balance changes. We've both been around the block with either this game or other games, and we've not done a bad job of predicting nerfs. But the buffs is always the fun part of the video, because it's where half of the time we're like, and I didn't even, like, the number of times I have to have said a line that basically translates to, if you're watching this and thinking, what the hell card is that? Welcome to the same club as me, because I didn't even know this existed and it's being buffed.
Yeah, like, let's think about the last balance patch. The nerfs of the last balance patch, what were they? Like, Rush went to 4 damage.
Yeah.
That's, like, the main one that came to mind.
Commander went to 6, which you were very happy about.
Yes, they killed Commandos. They took Commandos out back. But then think about the buffs.
FW.
Oh yeah, FW
Yeah.
too. Well, the buffs, Sabe and Motorize were both buffs from that balance patch, and those have been so much more impactful. Because like, even if Commandos hadn't been touched, Commandos would have just got steamrolled by Shuffle.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that like 93rd they've gotten better at. It seems, at least since I've started playing, it's something that they've kind of they're getting better with what they're buffing and how they're buffing it. Like, for example, Blood and Iron, we saw the release of like Trento Division, which was unplayable garbage on release. Now, when you read like Trento Division, now reads like pretty insane. It's an 8 cost 1-up 5/6 with Blitz that if you control a 4 attack unit, you just destroy a thing. That's a very appealing card, and I please print more 4 attack Italian units. For the love of God, let me play Trento. I just want to play Trento. But then like also naval warfare, they buffed the Marines, like the U.S. Marines, from 3 down to 2, which is so much better. Like they're getting a lot smarter with the cards they're touching up, and I think it's a much healthier direction, because it's letting people experiment a lot more with decks. Like, since the buff to the Navy, or to the Marines, like, I've been looking a lot at like US Navy mid-range as a potential deck that you could play, and then like the Trento buff and all that, like you're playing around with like Germany, Italy mid-range. There's just I just feel like they're getting a bit better with how they're treating the buffs. They're not so much like, here's a bunch of garbage buffs that aren't going to see play. It's a case of, here's some garbage buffs that aren't going to see play, and 1 or 2 interesting ones.
Yeah, that's absolutely. And also, when it comes to buffs, it's very interesting to see what rarity of cards that they buff. Because in the past it was definitely standards. Because standards, like there was just a lot of like absolute pack filler standards that they tried to give like at least a little bit of personality to the pack filler. Whereas now a lot of the cards that they buff will be like the specials and elites from the most recent expansion that just didn't hit right. That were just like too weak, or like what ended up being popular just absolutely stomps it. And that's where, like, even if they don't end up seeing play, but like Trento Division, 4 attack was like a really big thing, and they buffed Trento Division, rather than like say the 4/4 fight Schützen or the 4/3 draw if you have a 4 attack guy for US. And like obviously you could be like, well, those cards were better than Trento, so they didn't need the buff. But it is just that philosophy of they're buffing the higher rarity cards, which if you buff it to the point of playability, like they did with Sabe and Motorizé, where it's suddenly like, oh, you need to spend 4 special wild cards to get these cards you didn't previously have to play the tier 1 deck if you want to play the best deck in the game. But on the other hand, like if they buff it to just playability, or like you packed Sabe on day 1 of the expansion, you're like, well, this is kind of trash because shuffle is terrible and I just want rush and recons. But then they buff the hell out of you special. You're much more happy about that than like they buff a standard, because like if you have it or don't have it, it doesn't really change how easy it is for you to get it if it's playable. So I generally think it's a good idea to just make expensive cards interesting.
Yeah, I think I've just checked the balance patch from Air Supremacy, and they a bunch of stuff that we both missed, even though we both played a ton of these cards, was they buffed Carpathian, they buffed Yulan, and they buffed the Zero. Yeah. So, like, again, all very good targeted buffs to help like struggling nations like Poland, and then like decks that weren't super popular like mid-range Japan with the Zero. So yeah, like last balance patch, all the buffs I think were really good.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that I wanted to kind of highlight, I think, is there's been a healthy focus on what I would consider to be driver cards being changed one way or the other. And by that I mean cards that not necessarily are the when you say driver card, people are like, well, surely that you're going to want 4 copies for like, but actually a lot of the time in cards, driver cards tend to be specials that will really drive an archetype because you're probably going to see it. And I think they've done a really smart job about targeting ones that are trying to push archetypes that they want to see some diversity. Like, it's interesting to me. Once you get below tier 1, which is a bit weird at the minute, to say the least, I have issues. When you look at tier 2 right now, like tier 2 playable decks, there are so many different weird tweaks and changes and different things that are like different archetypes. You can play a mid-range deck at the minute and you could get Field Marshal and do okay. You're not going to compete on it because it's just not going to keep up with the 2 or 3 front-running decks that I'm sure we could talk about in great detail. But I think part of the reason that that's happened is that the team haven't been afraid to push cards that drive archetypes that we'd all like to see. Like, please, by the way, keep up with the continuing to push driver cards for mid-range. More, please. Because I'd like to see less swing, please. Because at the moment, I have some issues with the upper end of the game and the RNG. But at tier 2, actually, things are fairly healthy at the minute with diversity. I don't struggle to come up with a decent tier 2 deck to play around with and have some fun on. But when it comes to tier 1, yeah, okay, we're super narrow at the minute, but that's because we've got a couple of outlying cards. But yeah, I think the overall, at least in the time that I've been playing, the direction of change has become healthier for the game, in my opinion, even if there are still things that we all don't like, which inevitably there are going to be.
Yeah.
Crossfire.
For me, it's Seahawk. Seahawk is just...
I'm on the other side of that fence, my friend.
Like, there's just so many, like, in decks where I look at it and it's like, okay, so if a Seahawk hits the board, do I immediately lose? And it's like half of
See,
the decks, it's like yes, and the other half, it's like no, I have like 2 cards that can answer it, so if it hits the board and I have this card in hand, I am not going to immediately lose.
See,
for me,
ironic.
it's a case of, do I just lose to turn 4 Crossfire? If yes, my opponent has it. If no, we're fine.
Yeah, I mean, there is that. I mean, honestly, I'm pretty chill with most stuff at the minute. I think my biggest issue right now, although I'm sure we're not going to get into an entire thing about balance, that's a different conversation, but it is nice to talk about it. My biggest issue is I'm not a big fan of the high roll dependency aggro deck lean. Not in the sense that I object to them existing, but they're getting a bit too prevalent for me. And also, I will continue to be on record of the fact that if a card that was clearly designed to be a win condition for Shuffle and its package fits that cleanly into an Intel deck, fix it. It doesn't matter which of the 2 cards you want to touch. I don't really care whether you want to touch Shifting Doctrine and take Intel off it. By the way, you do. Or whether you want to look at tweaking the way that Sabe works, but it does not make sense that package is that neat and compact enough that you can shove it in almost anything. That said, I would also, and we said this in the last episode, or at least I did, please, for the love of all that is holy, for the next couple of expansions, just put some kind of restraint on Germany and Japan until everyone else catches up. Because otherwise, we're not going to see the diversity. That's my biggest problem at the minute, is actually the core card pool. The on a holistic level, there are 2 nations that are too far ahead on card pool for me. But I have to say, I do, at the moment, lean more on Core's side of the fence with Seahawk, because it answers a couple of the most feels bad decks for newer players to play into. And I have big worries that the RNG feels bad because they just steamroll you decks are actually going to start turning new players off.
Yeah. I'd say my big thing here, for not nerfing cards, but for just what card, like, class needs cards, is Britain needs a card that affects the board on turn 1 or turn 2. That is a standard. It doesn't need another card, or standard or limited. It doesn't need a second card to combo with it for it to do anything. And it is effective, and it is not just absolutely abysmally unplayable against a control deck. Because, like...
Can I add one thing to J. King's request? Just one tiny, tiny amendment. Can the card not be an aircraft?
Yeah,
and this is coming from me. Consider the source, 1939. Can it not, for once, be a plane?
There is a swath of, like, interesting British tanks that we do not have in the game. Give us a cheap British tank. I would love to play, like, Brit Germany tanks, or, like, Brit Finn Hines for some reason.
Alternatively, go Google the Royal Northumberland Fusiliers in World War II, because... Anyway, just repping my hometown. But carry on.
All right. Well, I don't want to get too far down the balance thing, because we have 3 more balance-related questions, and I'm sure more talk of current meta and current issues will come up. So let's take a look at question number 2 here. What is the most nerfed card? And how I measured this is the most number of the most changes with the intention to make the card worse, or, like, not necessarily intending to make it worse, but, like, with the knowledge that it will make the card worse, is maybe a better way of putting that. And also it not, like, how am I going to word this? So, I suppose the example I would give is production order. when they put both of the bombers in production order from 7 attack to 6 attack, that would count as 1 nerf, not 2 nerfs.
Oh, got you.
I will just say that it's not production order though.
Yeah. I feel like you mentioned this in a video before at some point, and I feel like it was something silly like Ura. I feel it was something like Ura, but it could also be like 20 Panzer, because I know number 20 Panzer Grenadiers also went through the ringer of like changes. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, this I will also accept if you can't name the card, name the type of card, like what it does, based on your previous card gaming experience of what is the type of card that has to be nerfed the most. Not just like once and it's dead, or like once it's still too good second time. Because, yeah, it's... What is just continually a problem card? What type of card?
So I kind of have already locked my answer in before we even got into this, and I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. So I'm not being quiet because I don't have anything to say. I'm being quiet because I want to let Core kind of go through his own logic behind this, because I kind of already know what my answer is, and I'm fairly certain that I'm in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm like 90% sure that this came up in like one of the history videos that you guys did. It's like a dream to me. I feel like I've seen you talk about this.
I suspect you're not wrong.
I see, the problem is, right? I just don't know. I haven't been around long enough.
That's fair.
I distinctly remember like Jaking mentioning that Ura got changed like 3 times, and like the second time they changed it to nerf it, they broke it. And then they had to change it again, and it still saw play. But like, when the things that normally need to be nerfed in card games, like frequently, are cards that generate resources for too cheap. So a card that draws you too many cards cheap, like Necropotence, for example, from Magic, that you just pay life and draw cards, or like things that generate like mana super efficiently, like Channel, for example, just pay life to generate mana. Just converting X resource into Y resource too cheaply is usually the things that have to get changed. But I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. I'm just gonna say Ura. I'm just gonna go with that one.
All right. And Bear, what is the answer that you locked in immediately? Apparently.
Pretty instantaneously, I think it's 158 Nakshub.
Oh god, yeah.
Because that card is a living balance nightmare, and has been multiple times, if I remember correctly. But this is where Jaking proves me completely wrong.
So, in fact, both of you are wrong. And
surprising.
I did forget to mention throughout all of these questions, the same caveat of I'm not counting any changes done before September 2019 apply, which I definitely makes Nakshub not the case. I don't think Nakshub, even if you count before that, would have more changes than this, because the card that I am talking about is Mare Nostrum, which
yes, I heard about this.
Which, depending on how you measure it, it has had 4 or 5 nerfs, depending on how you want to measure it. So, Mare Nostrum got printed as 1 credit, give a unit, when this unit deals damage, gain that much HQ. Now, then, that card was very, very powerful, very, very popular, but they also made a change to Chiro, which was, when the enemy gains HQ, or when somebody gains HQ, they take that much damage instead, which immediately people figured out you could play Mare Nostrum on their units, and then play Chiro, and then trade into their units, and they take a quadrillion damage. So they made it to only target friendlies, And then a month later, they said, okay, 1 credit's too good for this, so they made it 2 credits. And then at the same time, this is where we get to, does it count? They made certain effect cards in the game, including Mare Nostrum, stop stacking. So if you played two Mare Nostrums on the same unit, you would not heal the damage it deals twice, only once. And then about a year later, they did what is... You could argue it made the card more playable, but I can promise you the intention was to, because it was still a problem card, they brought it back to 1 credit, but they stopped making it so if you hit the unit, it would do it. It was only when the unit attacked. So you couldn't just like play it on a big guard and then Jagro has to trade 5 units into it and you heal 25. And the game's over. And then they rotated it, which I didn't count as a nerf, but then they brought it back in a completely changed form, which is, I don't want to say unplayable, but not particularly good, and hasn't seen any meaningful play. But it was also certainly not intended to be better than the original. It was that the original had no chance of ever coming back in its form. You would have...
I mean, in fairness... The original was just broken beyond all belief, given that the effect could stack.
You would have games consistently where Mare Nostrum would, like the 3 Mare Nostrums you put in your deck, would heal each player like 70 health. Like, games just went on forever. And the meta was like German Italy control, Soviet Italy control, Britain Italy control. And yeah, it was... You just couldn't race anybody, ever. There was not the ability to race down HQs in a control mirror because everybody just plays Mare Nostrum and then heals like 15, and then you play your Mare Nostrum, you heal your 15, and then it's just whoever has resources left when you hit fatigue wins the game. Aggro, there were certain aggro decks that could just go under, but this is also before Suppress existed. So I do wonder if old Mare Nostrum, maybe not like original on-print Mare Nostrum, but like, you know, maybe 2 credit Mare Nostrum could be brought back now that there's just so much access to Suppress, so it's not like you play it on a guard and aggro immediately surrenders.
I would tend to argue that you could probably bring back Mare Nostrum post the rework on stacking effects right now, and it would be played but not broken because Suppress exists.
Yeah,
I think if the effect's still stacked, as you say, I think it depends on what point in 2021 you want to pick. I don't think you could bring it back at 1 credit, but I don't think it needed to have the shit job that was done to it when it was brought back done to it, where it was reworked into. I will go much further. I honestly believe that even the people who are trying to play Mare Nostrum are mostly doing it out of nostalgia. It is pretty much an unplayable card at this point. It just doesn't generate enough value to be worth the space.
Yeah, this Mare Nostrum is very interesting because when I think of like most nerfed cards in other games, it's often cards that, like as you mentioned, Core, that are either giving you like tons of resources for way too many resources for too cheap, and then you know there's certain level of it's like, you know, if you're getting like the equivalent of like 4 mana for 1 mana, you make it okay, you only get 4 mana for 2 mana. It's like, well, that's still really good. And then it's like, okay, you get 3 mana for 2 mana. And it's like, well, depending on the deck, you still might play that. And then it's like, okay, you get 3 mana for 3 mana. You just played a 3-drop. Screw you. I've never seen, at least off the top of my mind, a card that was such a problem card that had to be changed so many times that was based around healing, like health gain or just elongating games, essentially. Like, I know health gaining cards have been nerfed in other games, certainly. And like the only one that I can really think of is the Hearthstone one that let you start at 40 health.
Renathal, yeah.
Yeah, instead of starting at the normal 30 health, you just started the game at 40 health, but at the cost of your deck had more cards to make it less consistent. And that card got nerfed just because it was so popular. But yeah, it's like, I think Hearthstone, or cards is rather unique, I think. But again, you guys might correct me here, in that Mare Nostrum and just healing in general has proved to be substantially more of an issue over the years than Burn.
Yeah, no, I mean, so in digital formats, you're 100% right. However, I will say, over the 3 decades of card gaming, in physical card gaming,
Okay, wasn't there
by far
wasn't there like a lifelink deck in
yes,
Magic?
so there was. I
Soul
lived through. Yeah, so there was a point in MTG where you could actually play. I remember. I think it's. God, was it only? No, it had to be. No, it might have been as few as 3 land. Anyway, if you drew the appropriate combination of 3 cards and played them in sequence, it created a irreversible and completely inarguable, effectively infiniloop, which meant that you had permanent, constant life gain that your opponent couldn't keep up with, and that card just got banned.
There was also there was like a combo as well. It was like Abzan. You'd play Kitchen Finks. You'd play Viscera Seer and the Phyrexia card. What's her name?
Yeah,
That's
I
different
can't
gaming
remember.
characters.
I can visualize the card, but yeah, it's much. I mean, to be fair, it's happened at least a half dozen times in Magic the Gathering's history, where white in particular has been able to generate some truly, truly ridiculous life gain.
Well, that Kitchen Finks deck in particular was built around specifically murderous red caps. The Kitchen Finks is like a 1 over 2 of that would let you gain enough life to draw the red cap, and then the red cap would just infinitely damage burn your opponent.
Yeah.
But there's also there's decks like Soul Sisters in Magic have existed where you're just playing like little dinky 1/1s that gain you life, and they just grow. You have creatures that grow off health gain. There's like mono white variants. There's been like black white death and taxes variants of Soul Sisters. Legends never really had like all that much life gain issues, but they printed Drain very sparingly. There was one card in particular, Snaketooth Necklace. It was a 2 mana item that it gave when equipped to attack a creature, it would give it +1 attack and Drain. They did end up changing it so the Drain only lasted until end of turn, but like that's the only thing I can think of in Legends where they came to like life gain.
Yeah, I mean it's as I say, there've been quite a few, and then it is very specific to, because of the way Magic works, that if you find any way to get hyper consistent life manipulation, it can get stupid. And I'm not going to go back and talk about the various ones that were out there when MTG was still a table, like a kitchen table game, because that's before competitive formats, it really didn't matter. But no, when it comes to digital card games, yeah, I think Cards is I think relatively unique in its moments of problem when it comes to HQ defense.
Yeah, because when I think of the most broken, just truly broken cards in Cards history, it is often less aggressive cards and more controlling cards. Like, it is stuff like Mary Nostrum that just gives you access to so much healing. It's stuff like SSCD where it's just very cheap, complete board wipe. Or it is these types of cards. And Mary is very interesting because it allowed, like, the best unit to play Mary on, or at least like the unit that most commonly saw Mary Nostrum played on it, was actually Panther G, just being hard run in control decks.
Yeah.
Because it's just a huge stick that you can't trade down easily, and it says cannot be targeted by orders. So it's like you just make a huge guy that is gonna hit. Like, whether you're hitting with it or they're hitting into it, it's gonna have to get traded down by like 4 units. And it's a 6 attack guy, so you're healing 28 off of your 1k card and your 5 drop, because your opponent can't hammer it. They can't do whatever else it does to kill it. And then when King Tiger got released, that became an even bigger issue because it was just Panther G on steroids. And I hated that meta because German controls would just play two King Tigers, both play Mare Nostrum on it. Neither one wanted to push it into the front line because then it becomes vulnerable. And you just like sit there. No one wants to put a unit into the front line because you just letting your opponent heal for 11 for free. Very, very silly time in Cards history. But in card design, that is very interesting, where oftentimes the way you have to, as power creep naturally happens, it's going to allow decks, in theory, to kill their opponent faster and faster as different combinations of cards allow for increased damage output. But it's a very different process in balancing that than it is to balance the ways of preventing damage, and that just type of healing or damage negation or however you're doing it. There's lots of different forms of doing it. Very different time balancing it, because as much as people complain about dying on turn 4, it's more enjoyable to die on turn 4 than it is to not be able to do anything in like a 30-minute game where you had zero chance of winning from turn 1. And like Hearthstone, or Cards has had that. Hearthstone has certainly had that. I go back and play Wild Hearthstone every now and then, and there's like certain times you'll just like play against a deck that's just like, oh, they can only take 1 damage at a time, like 6 turns in a row. They play you can't die and also become immune this turn, like 8 turns in a row, and it's like, oh, I literally cannot kill you. It is physically impossible for me to kill you. You just have to design that very differently, because it's a very different time between like being like, okay, this 1-drop has maybe it's a 2/3. Is 2/3 okay for a 1-drop? Whereas with health gain, it's like, okay, can this card heal you? What's the average amount this card heals you in a game?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I think also in the age of esports and like actually having attended like digitally attended tournaments, you have to become much more conscious of it too, because there are two very different feels bads if you're watching a tournament. Wow, that was over quickly. At least provoke some conversation about, hey, this happened and that happened, and man, I didn't see that coming. We've been here for 35 minutes, and this game shows no signs of being over. Is a whole different issue of feels bad, because at a certain point, and I'm sure J King certainly knows this. I don't know whether it was a thing in Tessel while you were doing any kind of commentary, but if you're casting on something and it goes endlessly, there's a point at which you run out of anything useful to say.
Oh yeah.
And it becomes less interesting for everyone, except for, and I will say this, the two focused players at the table who are constantly running the maths in their head about where this is going, especially in a game with a fatigue win condition, which is where the resistance problem came in. That's really interesting if you're the person doing the mathematics and you're the person playing against the other person and trying to figure out who's got it. It's unspeakably dull for everyone else.
That is... Yeah, I'm definitely very biased on this topic because that is my number one favorite strategy, my favorite decks, which is my favorite experience in card gaming, is a control mirror that goes on for 45 minutes and you're just trying to place every single threat to every single piece of removal. And that really comes from,
you
like,
and me both.
The first...
You're not alone.
Like, I started playing Hearthstone right when Nax came out. So the first, like, deck, tier 1 deck of any sort in any card game ever was Face Hunter.
Yeah. Undertaker Hunter.
Yeah,
yep.
Literally just Undertaker Hunter. I'm winning games on turn 5. I hit Legend in like the first month of playing because the deck was just so easy. It played itself. And I enjoyed playing aggressive decks. I could certainly play aggressive decks, but there was a point where I grinded enough in Hearthstone that I got the ability to play Control Warrior, which was often called Wallet Warrior in this period, because it was just all of the good, like, the equivalent of elites in the deck. And Control Warrior mirrors, you both had a ton of health gain, and you both had a very set number of pieces of removal and a very set number of things that could kill you. And the game was just all about like trying to get your opponent to play one piece of removal inefficiently, or like, depending on how you do your hand, potentially like spacing out your threats, but then just trying to race them down, or just playing very conservatively, playing for fatigue, not drawing cards, and hoping your current resources is enough to prevent their threat creation, so you have the fatigue win con. That is like my like just experience playing card games. That was my first experience playing card games, and it's definitely applied to how I do things in cards, and it definitely applies to my opinion on balance. Like, obviously, release Mare Nostrum, too good. But, like, I don't know, I feel like Mare Nostrum had, like, one or two too many nerfs. But, again, that's just me. I know...
I think it's fair.
People
I don't think you're alone in that. I think most top players I've met in any game that I've played, physical or digital, lean control because that's where knowledge and skill tends to pay off more. I will say, still one of my my goals in life in person is to catch a point where the two of us are in the same country and make sure I've got some Netrunner decks with me, because I have a feeling that is a game that you would enjoy. But anyway,
I look forward to this. All right, did anyone have any last Mare Nostrum comments they wanted to throw out?
Just can we do something? Can we like rotate it away and then bring it back in a way that makes it actually interesting, so it feels like, you know, Mare Nostrum hasn't just been old yelled? Because I think that's quite sad, given the history of the card.
This is actually a very interesting quick talking point before we move on to the next question, which is what to do with reworking cards that have been rotated. Because it's fine if you just have like an absolute vanilla piece of trash that nobody has played whatsoever, and then you like turn it into something that works with the new keyword from the new expansion, and then now it has some extra flavor. But when you have cards like Wolfpack or like Mare Nostrum, which were very, very powerful, very, very popular, got rotated because they were too strong for the standard game and we just wanted to take a break or possibly never bring them back. But people still, they were so popular and powerful, they still saw regular play from people who played the classic format. But then when you bring these cards back and change them, it stops people being able to play them in classic. It's not like you just released a new card and you never brought Mary back to standard, and you just released a card with the current Mary effect. You actually have prevented people from playing Mare Nostrum in its previous version in classic, even if they're not playing it in tournaments, even if you don't support classic as a format whatsoever. By doing these reworks to powerful cards that you don't want back in standard, you are actually denying people the ability to play it. And yeah, do you think that is like something that they should consider, basically?
I mean, I'm not. I've said it before. I'll keep saying it. I think the game would benefit from more play formats, and I do not see a reason in a digital formatted game that you can't run a true classic mode where you can have a true classic version of a card in your collection that can only be played in specific modes. There is no, but notwithstanding the lack of funding and all of that stuff, which is a different conversation and not for this video. Be good to do one at some point. I might try and set one up. But notwithstanding the difficulties of implementation for a small team, like one of the things that this I think cards would benefit from is more play modes. And I do think for the old school players, having a way to play effectively grandfathered text cards would be healthy for people who want to go and experience and play that. But I get that it's complicated to do, but I 100% think that there is plenty of benefit to looking at alternate play modes to allow cards with slightly more ludicrous text, because it's not the end of the world as long as it's not clogging it up. But when it comes to bringing it back, like the perfect answer with a rework is you'd like to bring back a reworked version of the card that is more or less the same card but more balanced. But in some cases, like Mare Nostrum, that's harder to do. I don't know whether it's impossible to do. We've had that conversation. But yeah, my view is that alternate play modes might be something worth putting some time into.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like returning cards and like changing their text, I think if the card is powerful and is being actively played in Classic, just don't touch it, don't bring it back. If for example 1939 decided to like take Commonwealth and just give it the same text as Counter-Strike, I'm pretty sure there'd be a very like large subsection of the player base that would be pissed. So like, I think if you ever change Commonwealth, because it's such a cornerstone piece of Classic, like even I'm aware of this and I like know nothing about this game. The fact that like it's such an iconic and like powerful card, if they brought it back and completely changed the text on the card, I think they'd upset more players than they would like appease. So I think if there's a card that is like an outlier, that is powerful, that is seeing active play in Classic, just don't bring it back, don't rework it, don't touch it. For other cards that aren't like seeing that play, like Oxford, like Sunderland, like Counter-Strike, yeah, work away, change them however you want. But on the side note, as far as like Mare Nostrum is concerned, I do think they should have just brought it back at 2 credits, original text, because it would have very much helped the situation we're in now in Standard, where there is like no healing at all in the format.
Yeah.
Because the format is miserable to play with no healing. Like Germany is the only nation with good healing, and it's Alpenfestung, and I hate Alpenfestung because Alpenfestung is a bad card, but you have to play it because it's the only thing that heals.
Yeah, that's absolutely the point we are at now, where they just decided, hey, healing has been too good, so we're gonna take out all the healing. That's fine, and then also we're going to introduce burn to like the most played factions of the game.
Exactly. I can understand and I can get behind the rotation of Glamour Boys. That's fair enough. Glamour Boys was incredibly annoying to play against, specifically for aggro decks. But at least give us back like Bollock Regiment. Like, just give us something.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to question 3 here. Question 3 is: order the nations from least to most nerfed.
Oh God.
So this is every instance, and this is, by the way, this is main nations only.
Thank the Lord.
Okay.
But for example, the Mare Nostrum would be, I would say, like 4 nerfs. That would count for 4 nerfs for Italy's, because the card was nerfed on 4 separate occasions.
Yeah.
So it's not number of cards that have been changed, but number of changes.
Yeah. That makes this infinitely harder, which I'm sure you're very aware of.
Yep, and again, this is September 2019 to present day.
So we're talking about least to most.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say least is probably US. Because US is normally the worst nation. And they tend to leave a lot of US cards alone for the most part, it seems.
I mean, the second half of your statement is true. The first half of your statement goes to how long you've been in the game.
Not very long.
There have been times when you'd have struggled to describe US as the worst nation in the game.
I know there was a period where like US front 9 was like the best deck. But
there's also a period where US ramp was ludicrously strong. Then there was also US retribution, which was insane.
Are we counting retributions?
Yes, retribution would count as.
Okay. Does this also include changes to the retributions themselves?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Does this include changes to the 12 cards inside the pool?
Yes, but they would all count as, like, if... I don't remember if... Because I know they put the develop 2 retributions from 4 to 6 in a separate...
6.
Yeah.
Did
they change anything else?
I think they changed one.
There was one other one I think got changed. I don't think it was massively relevant, but
Yeah. But yeah, if those happened in two separate patches, those were counted as two separate changes.
Right, got you.
Also,
I still think
just on the
there's
conversation of US, I will say that US cards have been fairly consistently pretty good in that they will have like 12 playable cards, so they are an excellent ally choice, and like they will have 12 broken cards that like US ally will be like the US ally decks will be the best decks in the game for control and aggro, and there will not be a playable US main nation deck because they don't have 40 good cards for a single archetype.
And this is what I mean. Like, in the entire time I've been playing, the US main has been pretty not great. Like, I started playing Blood and Iron when like we had ramp meta.
Yeah.
And the better version of the deck was Brit main.
Yeah. No, I still think, by the way, the top end to the conversation I was having with you is I still think there's a good case that I think US is probably close to it. I think it's no, because Soviet's going to beat it out just because of a couple of particular cards. Yeah, I'm pretty confident US is going to be the least nerfed.
Yeah, like I just because things like US is primarily like played for ramp. I don't think Warbands has never been touched. War Machine I don't think has ever been touched. What was it? The Hour of Need, the 4K ramp, I don't think was ever touched. Quartermasters was never touched, from what I understand. The ramp card draw guy.
Yeah.
Like ASW Patrol, I don't think was ever touched.
Honestly, there's like changes, like
Quartermasters
particularly
was buffed actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say changes. I think I'm assuming we're talking about changes in the
yeah, it
conversation
was a 2/3.
relevant.
It had 3 health
Yes.
on release.
Christ.
It was very, very bad.
Yeah, so we are talking exclusively about nerfs, and this only comes up like in a couple things. We are talking about nerfs that were stated to be nerfs. There are a few times in Cards history where there have been changes that are make the card objectively better that were intended to be nerfs, and those have been recorded as nerfs as said such in the relevant dev blog.
Yeah, if the developer's going to tell you it's a nerf, even if it buffs the card, clearly it's a nerf. Okay.
Also, a potentially relevant thing, OCCs obviously do not dictate balance, but US is the second least brought nation to OCCs. It has been brought twice more than Soviets.
Yup.
Yeah, see, the thing with Soviets is they only get good elites, and everything else is kind of like whatever. And I think that has remained true for the most part historically. Like there've been a handful of really broken cards, like Spyring, for example.
Ugh.
But I don't think Spyring was ever changed.
No, they nerfed the researches that you got off Spyring. A few different
but
times,
they never changed the card itself. Yeah.
There are actually a couple of... However, I will say there are a couple of Soviet cards like... the Alpine Light Infantry Enabler got changed because it was stupid. Then it kind of got changed again, but that wasn't technically a change because they announced it as a bug fix. Actually, technically speaking, they initially didn't announce it at all. Then they explained it away as a bug fix, which is it's working as intended. I'm just going through it. I'm pretty sure US is at the bottom. I think it's then going to be Soviets, just because I can't remember that many. The other three, I'm pretty sure that Britain is actually going to be first or second on this list.
I think Germany is number 3. Then it's a toss-up between Japan and Britain.
Britain, that's where I am as well. I think I'm gonna go US, Soviet, Germany, Japan, Britain in ascending order.
I'm gonna go the same, except Japan top, Britain second.
Second, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
We've even agreed to be competitive.
I'll need you to repeat that real quick just so I can get that down. So it's U.S., Soviet, Germany as first, second, third. You both agreed on that.
Yeah. I've got Japan as second, and Britain as the most nerfed nation, and KARDS just flipped the top two.
All right.
How wrong are we?
Right, how wrong are we? Off you go.
Well, Japan is actually the least nerfed nation by a fairly. Honestly,
Wait a minute.
geez.
What were the 38 US nerfs? How many of these were pre-me?
I know there was some like ramp things like what's it called? Like the 7-cost special plane. I know that got changed. Where is it?
Oh God, there was the huge fighter bomber.
Bomber Mafia got nerfed twice. Production Order got nerfed twice.
Twice, yeah. I keep forgetting they didn't do it once because first time round wasn't enough.
Yeah,
I'm curious as to whether you've broken it down. Yeah, I'm curious as to whether you've broken it down, but how many of these USA nerfs are actually the same card being nerfed more than once?
I have not gotten that deep into the stats here. I have the relevant information, but it would require a lot of time and effort.
Oh God,
to
yeah.
pull it out.
I'm not suggesting you put the time in if you haven't already, but hey, I got Britain right, which makes me happy.
Yeah,
Japan
TBF
being
Avenger.
bottom.
Yeah, that's surprising to me.
Yeah, you guys nailed Soviet and Germany. But yeah, Japan, least changed nation. Or at least nerfed nation, I should say. And that one's honestly kind of interesting to me. I would not have thought it, but like seeing it kind of makes sense to me. I'm just thinking back, the best Japan has basically never had. This is like the most Japanese variety of Japanese decks we've ever had at any point in Cards history.
Yeah.
Japan has normally had one deck, and it was usually like just the fastest consistent deck in the meta that they didn't really touch because it was either bad because control was too good and then they nerfed control, or it was good and then they just buffed control cards because Japan was so finicky. Like, you nerf one card in aggro and the entire thing falls apart. And then
falls apart,
Then there's no aggro deck, and then the meta just becomes a arms race to put in the most, like, 8-cost cards into your deck. So, yeah, the Japan really has apparently gotten away. But what I find actually really interesting is it's relatively even.
Yes.
It's not that big of a difference.
No, I will say I am personally quite surprised that Britain is not a significant amount further at the top end than I thought it was going to be. I was expecting a bigger gap between basically Britain and anything else.
Yeah,
but that's because I'm very...
I knew Britain was going to be pretty high because, like, off the top of my head, like, the changes I've been here for, all the commander changes, obviously, and then, like, I know, like, aerial reconnaissance got changed, I know, like, a couple of the countermeasures got changed, there was, like, a few other things that I was, like, kind of aware of that had been hit.
I mean, one of the key things has always been, I think, as a driving point in this, is that it's a bit of a meme, but it's also slightly accurate, is there is the mantra of all competitive players for the longest time was ABB, which is always ban Brit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Britain is... I can probably name, just off the top of my head, the most, like, British nerfed cards out of all of these. They really come to mind, because Britain, I feel like, are the most just, like, slap in the face, why was this printed? Like, obviously this needs to be nerfed. So, like, a 2-cost supply shortage, critical damage needed to be reworked if you were going to release supply shortage as a card. Glamour Boys at 3/7.
Glamour Boys,
way too high health. Seaforth was released at a 1/8.
Which is ludicrous.
Yeah, I recommend looking up Seaforth. That's a one for the ages. Seaforth was like the guard in the game for
C4
way
at
too
1A is the
Yeah.
just insane.
yeah, in a world before suppression.
Yeah, I was gonna say, bear in mind, this is before we actually had everyone going, oh my god, this suppression thing. When I still remember the joys of when it was like, oh look, we've got duress and the M10 in the game. My god, suppression's gonna take over the world.
Yeah, this is the Soviet ones are honestly the ones that I'm like struggling the most to like think up of the nerfs. But yeah, this is just, I mean, it is just what happens at when you have such a long period of like different metas. When you're looking at this data from, again, it's September 2019 to October 2025. You go through so many metas, and like some last a day, and then it's just like, oh, this was like an unintended change, so we're just like changing this card, and nobody thinks of it as like a big nerf because it was like there for a day. Sometimes, actually, a fair amount of Soviet and US cards have been nerfed for either draft or low rank purposes, where they'll like nerf a really well-performing standard or limited card that sees no play in tier 1, but it's just like, okay, this card is like way too much value for a standard. Like California comes to mind.
Cali, yeah. Ironically, the search currently open on my client is Soviet and US standard cards.
Yeah, California got nerfed twice as well. US has gotten a lot of nerfs. Yeah. Oh yeah.
If you really want to get
California
some
was
chuckles about badly balanced cards, look up the history of California.
California was so awful to deal with.
I'm only aware of it as like the 5/3 blitz with the can only take 1 damage.
Yeah, so it was released as a 6-cost 7/4, no blitz, and it had the text, when this would take damage, when this unit takes damage, turn the damage to 0 and give this unit -1 health. And nobody played it because it was a 6-cost 7/4 infantry. But it was a standard, so it was really, if you're like at low ranks, your opponent plays that and then pushes a California into the front line, you just lose. It's just over. This thing's like 4 for 1.
I was going to say, when he says nobody plays it, what he means is nobody played it competitively, which was arguably true for California for most of its life, but it was a new player's most hated card.
So then they nerfed the 7/4 no blitz to a 6/3 with blitz at 5 cost, and changed the text to, when this would take damage, reduce the damage to 0 and give this unit -2/-1. So it's a 6/3, it takes damage, it goes to a 4/2, it takes damage, it goes to a 2/1, it takes damage, it dies. But that started seeing competitive play, because as it turns out, what was already the best deck, or at least one of the best decks in the game, were US Frontline, where you tried to get the Frontline and then you played two or three copies of We Can Do It. And it turns out, if the meta is Frontline just throwing units at each other, and you can put a 6 health California in the front line, it doesn't matter if your opponent hits it 3 times and it goes down to a 0/3. It's a 0/3 that has to take damage from 3 more sources before they can take the front line back from you. And then
during which time, odds are you're probably able to take advantage of the front line.
There's also just like carpet bombing couldn't deal with it. Like you just. Like, your opponent would just push a California to the front line on turn 6, and it's like, oh, I was going to carpet bomb and destroy their entire board, but that's just going to leave them with a 4/2, and then they refill. Because, it used to not take... The damage was not just combat damage, which is what they eventually changed it to. Which was a good
And even then, it was still really, really painful for new players.
You'd play a US-Poland... with the more common was US German, but there was a brief moment where US Poland was actually the most popular US deck, with very little actual like intel, because US has no intel. But you would run the unity as strength, the given infantry +1/+1 for every infantry you control, and you just like play some two planned wests in a row, play California, get into the front line, play unity as strength, and you can't lose. The game's over.
Just move on. At this point, answer that. Oh wait, Yeah, can't.
Yeah, so
Patriots
California
is home.
nerfed twice, Yank nerfed twice,
Twice,
Bomber
yeah.
Mafia nerfed twice, Production Order
Twice.
nerfed twice. Yeah, US.
Yeah, shockingly enough, a lot of, ironically enough, given US wartime quotes, it would appear that it's so good they nerfed it twice is indeed the thing that carries the US. Fair enough.
Yeah, once I have
But yeah.
more time one day, I would love to see this broken down, like by expansion, by year kind of thing, to get into the details of like see if our memory of what decks were the best, what nations were the strongest at periods of time actually coincides with.
Man, that would be
nerfs.
so much fun, wouldn't it? Just where the nerfs fit with the memory of what was good when.
Even just like a timeline of when these nerfs happened would be very interesting, because I feel like the US one would be like spike in 2019, 2020, and then just like stay still for like 3 years,
For the
and then
rest
like
of it. Yeah, basically, yeah.
Winter War comes out and it spikes again.
And yeah, basically, it's got 2 really big peaks and not a lot else.
But all right, so I will not be giving out any points for that one, since you guys both put Japan at the top. But well done. Good effort.
I'm just taking a merit award for turning up for this thing in the first place.
Okay, so we are on to question 4, the final question of this section, the balance changes section, and then we can get Core out of what I'm sure is his own personal hell of being asked questions about a game he did not play.
Yeah.
So the last one is, what major expansion has had the fewest card changes? So not card changes that happened while this was the most recent expansion, but the expansion that has had the fewest number of changes to cards from that expansion. And sorry, it is specifically major expansion, just because like obviously the expansions that have like 8 cards in them are gonna have less changes to them. So yeah, this is Allegiance, Breakthrough, Legions, Brothers in Arms, Winter Warfare, Covert Operations, Blood and Iron, Naval Warfare.
Blood and Iron, yeah.
Hold on. Okay, so this is buffs and nerfs.
Yes. Yeah, this is total changes.
Yeah, fewest total change
Buffs,
cards.
nerfs, and reworks.
All right.
Again, I have no clue. This is all.
Well, this one, in theory, should be one of the more recent expansions. Naval Warfare does apply to this. They've been around for less time, so they have had less opportunities to have had changes to them.
Definitely not scrolling through the Naval Warfare set right now. Just reminding myself whether there's anything that I've missed. Okay. And then... So you're not counting, obviously, the base set, but you are counting the expansions from Allegiance onwards.
Yes. Well, I mean, I could count the base set, but I'm going to tell you now, the base set is not the least changed set in cards.
No. No, I'm just... I just specifically, because you say expansions, no, the base set is going to have seen quite a lot of changes. I have a sneaking one. Suspicion.
I will say, so, included in this, I am including World at War as a quote-unquote major expansion.
Yeah.
Just because it is a lot of cards.
I suppose you'd kind of have to, because the set itself is just a huge number of cards.
Yeah, I'm mainly cutting like Catalyst and Uprising and Theaters of War.
Yeah.
Are we counting, so a card that generates more cards, if the other cards it generates were nerfed, are we also counting that? Or is that all one?
It depends. So
if the card and each piece has been nerfed.
So for a card like Type 94, where you're generating a surprise attack. When surprise attack was buffed, it would count as a buff towards both surprise attack and Type 94. If it's something like they nerfed the B-24D, it would not count as a nerf to Bomber Mafia as well. So like if it adds a very specific card, if that specific card gets changed, it counts as a nerf. If it's like can generate cards, even if it's like the most generated picked option, it's not going to count.
I mean, like on Freda, because they nerfed each piece.
Yeah, so that would count as one.
It's one. Okay, yeah. Okay. Double checking, making sure.
Yeah. Because it happened at the same time. If they changed each piece into two separate things, it would count as two.
3, 4. Did they change something else in here, or am I just... Oh, yeah. Yeah, 10. Okay, yeah, so it's definitely not that then. And then this is all the sets I know. Oh, God, I have no idea if any of these got changed. Okay, so the Outrage nerf, does that mean... So the nerf to Outrage, does that count for card changes for everything that generates an Outrage?
That one I counted it as one.
Okay, so like the fact that Outrage nerf doesn't affect like Furor and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I have no idea if any of these were changed.
Okay, I'm gonna go out on a limb. Because I can.
Alright.
I think it's Brothers in Arms. Scrolling through the sets.
Brothers in Arms, okay.
Cause got far more concentration and patience than I do because he's counting.
Well, I'm just counting the ones that I recognize that have been changed. I'm gonna say Covert Operations.
Alright.
Of the sets I'm most familiar with, it's the least that I can see.
Alright. And I will say, what number do you think we're dealing with total number of changes for the least from one expansion?
So, from what I counted in Covert Operations that I recognize as changed cards, 8.
Alright. And Bear, what do you think the Brothers in Arms number of
I
changes
am incredibly struggling to concentrate at the moment, but I only counted 4 cards in Brothers in Arms that I am aware of have ever been changed.
Alright. Well, we have Bear tying up the score with the least changed expansion being Brothers in Arms, with only 7 changes across all, I think, 85 cards.
God damn it, I forgot Bushmasters and the BFL. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so only
but yeah.
3 nerfs, and this one, it was a little bit of a hint at the very start of this part when we looked at what period of time saw the most and least changes in cards. Because 2023 was the year that had the fewest changes, and in July 2023 is when Brothers in Arms came out. And they had 2 balance patches before the next expansion, which was Winter War, and no card other than Route, which was, we worked for the convert stuff, has been changed since Brothers in Arms since then. And yeah, Brothers in Arms is kind of the expansion that I think 1939 wants us all to forget. And this is just my hypothesis, but I have a theory about Brothers in Arms, that Brothers in Arms, the expansion, is why we have so much power creep in the more recent major expansions. So something that's kind of visible from the timeline I gave you of when expansions came out, but I think a lot of players who were not playing cards during this period might not realize, is so cards Allegiance came out in December 2019, and then in 2020 we had 2 major expansions. The game hit full release. Things were going smoothly. We also had, each of those major expansions had a mini set. And then we reached 2022, where they announced, okay, we're going to be adding these mini expansions every month that had 7 cards, and the 7 cards will be more powerful on average, to like shake up the meta, but we're trying out different things. Also, Theater of War was thrown in 2020. And that led to a pretty stagnant meta. The changes did have big effects. Supply Shortage was a World at War mini set card. Like Spitfire, the Elite Spitfire in Britain was another one that just comes to mind. Southern Plan, Monsoon Rot are both cards from World at War. So there's definitely some meta influencing cards that came out. But the total number of cards was 35 because it was 5 sets of 7. And then they started to do skirmish cards, which was every 2 weeks there would be a fun little game mode open for a couple days, and if you won a game in skirmish, you would get a new card that was introduced. So it was one new card every 2 weeks, and that went on for like 6 months, which worked out to be, well, like 12 cards. So basically, over the span of like a year and a half, there was next to no new content in cards. The meta was very stagnant, and this was also led into 2023, which is the year with the fewest changes. I don't know if there was a balance patch. I think there might have been only one balance patch from Worlds 2022 and Brothers in Arms releasing in June or July 2023. And basically the meta sucked. It was just the exact same decks as Worlds being played. Nothing changed. Brothers in Arms came out, and everyone's like, okay, we have a big expansion, 85 cards. It's the first time in 2 years since we've had a major expansion hit cards. What's it going to do? Well, if you go and look through the Brothers in Arms in your collection, so many of those cards are abysmally unplayable. Like, absolute utter trash.
Yeah, while Jaking's going, I want it for cause benefit, because I just, for cause benefit, I'm gonna give you a few examples of my favourites from this. Britain got a 1/8 guard
Oh, God.
as a standard card at 4 cost, which I shit you not has the text deals +3 damage to HQs.
Yeah, so Soviets had a 3-cost 1/8 guide that nobody played, and then Britain had Seaforth guide,
US...
Seaforth Highlanders, a 4/7 guide, and then they were like, well, Britain needs a 1/8 guide.
Yep. The US got a 1/3 artillery that got +1 for each friendly unit in the front line, but cost 4.
All you had to say was this was the set that introduced the Grenadier Brothers, and I would have believed you.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you've got...
My personal favorite is Soviets got a 2-cost 2/3 Alpine standard infantry, and that was the only Alpine card from the entire set, and it is one of 2 Alpine cards that Soviets have ever received, and the other one has no synergy with the first one.
To be fair, the Soviets... Yeah, Soviets got another one of my favourite completely ludicrous text choices on a standard card in history, which is the 1357th Rifles, which gets, when this unit takes damage or is fully repaired, it gets +2 attack. At a time when really no one was wanting to pay 5 cost for that at all. And then just you get to things like Battle Valor and stuff like that. But I mean, honestly, Brothers in Arms, with the exception of a couple of interesting cards, largely so painfully mid it hurts.
Yeah, I'm just looking to. There was some like powerful stuff in here. Sincerely yours, the Stuka 87G. You had where is it? Like Night Bombing was like.
To be fair, if you really want to get a feel for Brothers in Arms, I highly recommend searching Brothers in Arms and just looking at everything that isn't elite. Because the elites, there are some decent elites in there. Then you look at everything else and go,
Naval Engagement, Maelstrom, ASW Patrol, which I believe was like pretty relevant for quite a while.
The
big
To be fair, they did. Yeah, you got the Machi.
The big Machi was actually a skirmish card that came out it was, I think, a month or 2 months after Brothers in Arms, but that got added into the Brothers in Arms set, like, retroactively.
Yeah. I was going to say, I remember that being a reward for a skirmish. No, I mean, you
big shoots.
Things like, you also got Tupolev. Yay, that was a lot. But anyway, and protect the pockets,
Yeah,
the cards
protect-
that
oh,
everybody
Lord.
wanted to not be terrible.
Yeah. Meta warping threat, protect the pockets.
Yeah. And, like, if you look at the cards that got nerfed, because there was 3 cards from this expansion that have been nerfed, and, like, Shinano was absolutely game-breakingly powerful on release.
But yeah.
Island Defense was completely meta warping. You just stopped being able to play aggro until they nerfed that. Dragon Slayer was, like, very popular, and I'm glad they nerfed it, but it wasn't, like, as taking the game by storm. And then, like, you look at the stuff they buffed, and Bushmasters and the BFL are both still unplayable outside of, like, the Bushmasters OTK. Route is just a complete and utter rework of an otherwise unplayable card, and Storm Dragon is still unplayable. So it's like,
I'm curious what the old text on Dragon Slayer was.
Dragon Slayer just had 5 health. The veteran version was 5.
Yeah,
health. There was a 6.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, this expansion sucked. And I think part of it was that Brothers in Arms also introduced rotation. So I think the idea was we don't have to do a large number of incredibly powerful cards because it's going to fit right in as if they were like mid cards, but we're hitting rotation, we're removing like 100 cards from the game. And it's going to be like this really big deal. It's going to shake up the meta. But then the actual Brothers in Arms rotation list rotated like maybe 2 cards that I've ever seen play in the 100 that they removed from the game. And it introduced like 10 cards that saw play out of 85. And then the next expansion was Winter Warfare 6 months later, which was absolutely, utterly broken. Just completely meta warping. If you weren't playing like half your deck Winter Warfare cards, you were not playing the game right when that expansion came out. And the rotation list was much more brutal. It took away much more beloved cards. Like obviously could have done more as we talked about previously, but yeah, Brothers in Arms I think is just like a 6-month period that 1939 hopes that we all forget because there were no changes. The meta was stagnant. The cards that came in sucked. The cards that were moved weren't played, and they have not circled back to any of like the mechanics particularly. Like there was veteran, but like no veteran deck ever was a thing. There was just like 2 or 3 playable veteran cards.
Like they popped a couple of pincers in there, but then rapidly gave up on.
Yeah, they reintroduced pincer and then immediately removed everything.
Yeah, it's just like, well, that was a bad idea. Yeah, it was very underwhelming, and then no, Winter Warfare was just a little different boardgame. Winter Warfare was my first big expansion that I could really dig into in the game, and oh boy, okay, yeah, that was a special moment.
Yeah, like if you just look through the cards from Brothers in Arms, it's not that you can't find good cards, but like if you look through Winter Warfare, Covert Operations, Blood and Iron, or Naval Warfare,
yeah,
you will not get through a nation without being like, holy crap, that card was printed and still hasn't been nerfed. Like that is just so much better than everything that has ever been printed in a similar like effect or style of that. Brothers in Arms just doesn't really have that. It's just like a bunch of good cards. And
I mean, like, I would argue that, like, as noted by them being the only 2 nerfs that I actually really count, because Dragon Slayer was more of a rebalance and a fairly reasonable one. Like, Shinano and Island Defense both got hit because neither of them should have been printed the way they were printed.
Yeah.
It really was that simple. It was just these cards are broken, oopsie. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I enjoyed that, and I actually scored some points.
Yeah, so we're now tied 3-3. Core, you didn't score any points in this part.
Shocking.
Yeah, so
turns out blind guessing about metas I never even knew existed is not great for points.
Turns out.
Well, I hope you still enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something. So that is going to be it for part 2 of this video. Once again, we're going to be breaking this up into 3 parts. So thank you very much, everybody, for getting to the end of this one. This one was shorter than the last one. Probably going to come out to be around an hour and a half. And thank you again, Bear and Core, for joining me on this. you guys, both Cards content creators, you both stream, you both do YouTube. Links to both of those are in the description down below. So, guys, absolutely, if you enjoyed this video, go check them out as well. Absolutely worth your while. And yeah, that is it for part 2, the balance changes thing. And now we are looking forward to, in the next video, part 3, which is just called the Deep Cuts. We're getting
We're
questions.
not looking forward to it. Free us now.
Yeah, so this is where things get really difficult. On the other hand, this might be slightly easier for you, Core, because you're gonna have questions that, like, some questions, perhaps, we will have to see in part 3. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I will catch all of y'all in the next one.